So welcome everybody to day 2, well, official day 2, unofficial day 4 of Stepping Forward. I have to begin by thanking everybody who has either been a part or has become a part of this story. It really feels like this is a project that has kind of rolled down a hill and become bigger and bigger as it goes. So, you know, welcome to the snowball. I would like to thank most of all Alserkal Arts Foundation and the Alserkal family and our director, Vilma, for making this possible. Sadly, she couldn't be here with us today, but she sends everybody her best. I will thank Faisal and Mace from Warehouse 421. This started as a conversation in one of our offices saying, let's do something together, and here we are. I want to thank Joanna Settle from NYU for coming in and saying, you know, I'm here and I'm staying, and for really making this convening possible. We have managed to bring together a really extraordinary group of people, a growing group of people. We have had workshops. We are really thinking seriously about what it means for us to be here, and that here is a really generous here. It's not a restrictive here. It's a here saying, you know, there is space. We understand that people will go in and out, but the point is to always try as much as possible to be sensitive to conditions on the ground, to speak to really varied audiences with many voices, and to really say that this is, you know, if you're interested, if you want to know more, if there's things you don't understand, if things make you uncomfortable, which is where we began from, you know, talk to us. And this question of discomfort is a really interesting one. It was my starting point. I don't work in performance. I'm not a performance curator, and I sort of, you know, had a hesitance in entering a field where I felt I was relatively ignorant. And I have learned so much, mostly by this insistence on practice that really came from Joanna and Mace, that we must be really practice-led, and the people we invite in should have a practice that's rooted in performance, where that's their kind of main mode. And my insistence that we really needed to think about how we research and document performance and what it means for the creation of a wider academic field. Because if you're going to teach performance, then you need a sort of messy history of performance. So we've tried to do both. Thank you for bearing with us. We had these conversations 2 years ago, which led to a set of 4 subject areas. So today's day is devoted to pedagogy and to support. We'll make introductions as we go. So in the interest of keeping to time, I will introduce Pushpamala and the first talk. I also wanted to say some of you were here for Venere's performance. We want to stick to time, so you know, if you have any burning questions after Pushpamala's talk, feel free to ask those questions. We'll do our best. But otherwise, also, Venere is here, and there will be breaks, and there will be a lunch break, so you can also approach her directly. But I wanted to say a big thank you to Venere for sharing with us something that felt so powerful and so intimate. Thank you. And now over to Pushpamala. Pushpamala is an artist based in Bangalore. In her strongly feminist and subversive work as a photo and video artist, sculptor, performer, writer, and curator. And in her collaborations with photographers, writers, theater, and film directors, she seeks to intervene in the dominant cultural and intellectual discourse. Her work is often polemical, looking at the idea of the nation state in an age of globalized neoliberalism and using the idea of cultural memory to explore history and contemporary society with irony and wit. And she's going to give us a talk entitled The Body Politic, looking at the centrality of performance, both to the camera and more recently in a more kind of theatrical mode across her own practice. And this will be followed by Q&A with our very own George Jose, who is a professor of anthropology at NYU. So over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm usually not invited to performance workshops or symposia because my work is not seen as performance really. And I've not really been doing live performance. I don't like to be vulnerable. I don't like to be stared at. But I've been actually performing in front of the camera. And so I basically work in masquerade. So I think there's this whole history of masquerade which I'm very interested in. And sometimes I think the whole idea of the nation is a masquerade, and it reiterates itself again and again in a country like India, which is actually not one nation, but made up of many communities and many kinds of social formations. And we all come together, and then we have all these strange sort of rituals in which, like the Republic Day parade, or the Prime Minister goes to far-flung areas and wears the hats of those areas and dances with the people. And so we also have them in, at homes and in other gatherings where there are things like tableaus and performances. For example, some of them are rituals, like for example, there's a strange ritual of coming of age for women in certain communities, of girls in certain communities, where at puberty they're dressed up as goddesses or even gods sometimes, and they're worshipped. So my work actually takes from a lot of different things. I use a lot of layers of references in my work. And yeah, so I use a lot of humor and this desire to be someone else. And my work is also many times site-specific. And I use a lot of women's images and women's narratives, and in a sense deconstruct them with different kinds of strategies. And yeah, I use layers of references from different things I'm interested in, and sometimes the recreations. And I use most of my work, I'm actually a trained sculptor, and in the mid-90s I started doing photo performance and also performance videos. And I do mainly two kinds of photo performances. One is the photo romance, which is a kind of story where there are different characters. I'm the main protagonist. And the others are like tableaus. I'm very interested in the form of the tableau vivant. And so they're like, and usually they're recreations of already existing images as closely as possible. So my first photo romance was called Phantom Lady or Kismet, and was set in the city of Bombay. This was done between 1996 and 1998. So I'm just showing you some of the references earlier. So there's this character called Fearless Nadia, who was a stunt film actress, very popular stunt film actress. She was an Australian, and in the 1930s and 40s, she was called Fearless Nadia because she did her own stunts. Another influence has been Bhupen Kakkar, the Indian artist, who was, when I was a student, like he was a great influence, and he didn't actually do performance works, but in his catalogs he had these strange sort of performative pictures, and I felt that was something that nobody had really taken up. And many years later, I sort of had this reference in my head when I started doing performance work. And this is the photo romance, and the photo romance has an interesting history because it started in fascist Italy in the 1930s, and it was basically like mills and booms, which were done for working class women. And then the form became very popular and spread everywhere, and there used to be like these in all the magazines, like even in India, there used to be these, they're basically photographic narratives, and they usually have text, but I don't use text in my work. So I'll just quickly go through, it's a long story of 25 photographs. And I also use different genres in my work. Like, for example, this is a action, genre as well as a thriller. So, and I use the film noir style. They're all done in very iconic locations of Bombay. So it's about this, you have to make up your own story. So it's about this phantom lady who comes to Bombay looking for a lost twin sister, in my head, and who's a vamp, who's with the dawn, this kind of villain. So it looks at different kinds of, stories of the metropolis. So there's a smoking, drinking woman in a evening dress. That's my gallerist, by the way, who's also playing me but tied up. So, and most of these people are the artist friends, and who act in my work. By the way, this has now become Shah Rukh Khan's house, if you're interested. This was just before he bought it. We sort of sneaked in there. It was an abandoned place and shot there. Yes. So this is his old Parsi house belonging to my gallerist, which is full of old Chinese things, So I use all the, I've not brought in anything from outside. They're all sort of props inside the house. It's an Irani restaurant. So this is interesting because when we went to check, plan the shoot, which was in the early hours of the night, this was an empty kind of veranda. It's in the Flora Fountain in the center of Bombay. And then when we actually shot at 4 o'clock in the morning, there were all these pavement, people sleeping on the pavement, immigrant workers. So it became this kind of strange mix of the documentary film and the fantasy film. So sometimes I also mix up the photographs, so the ending may not always be this. So this other form that I use, I'm just going to go through quite rapidly because I'm showing you quite a lot of images. Other thing I'm interested in is this whole Victorian tableau vivant, where people sort of, it was done on a stage, sometimes in parties as well. And people sort of dressed up as characters, and they usually recreated some famous painting or a scene. Yeah, so it was very popular, at least in my state. And my mother used to actually organize these things. She was an amateur actress. And that is me, by the way, at the age of 9 or something like that. I'm this pious person sitting on the ground. So it's from the Mahabharata, a character called Ahalya, who becomes a stone, and then she is sort of awakened when the god Ram steps upon the stone. But I love those kind of foundation stones over there. It's not a rock, so they didn't find a rock. This is my mother. So there used to be these kind of, Republic Day and Independence Day, there used to be these kind of tableaus and events where great women of India, costumes of India, brides of India, and so on. So we all took part in them. So these are some of the things that I refer to in my work. This is a great freedom fighter, the Queen of Jhansi, played by my mother. So this particular project I'm talking about is called Native Women of South India, Manners and Customs. I'm showing you one section of it because it's a huge project done over 4 years, which has 4 different series. So the principal series is called the Native Types. There are all these. So this was done between 2000 and 2004. And the original project was to actually recreate stereotypical or archetypal images of South Indian women. We were making fun of each category. And, but then later, as we were shooting, it grew into this huge project and became 4 different series, where there was the ethnographic series, the popular series, and the process series. And all of them kind of deconstructed the original image. So I'm just showing the reference picture, and the reference pictures on the left. So this was this kind of cover. And we were finding reference material as we were going along. It was not that everything was set. It was a lot of improvisation. And so an elaborate set was created. I think I worked with a lot of the popular kind of, the people who created the popular culture of the city. So these were kind of hoarding painters, auto rickshaw fellows, like the belt was made with an auto rickshaw decorator. and so on and so forth. So it was very elaborate, took 3 or 4 months to produce. This is a painting by Raja Ravi Verma. Sorry, I don't have the thing. This is again a very popular picture of Lakshmi, the goddess Lakshmi, who is you will see in every kind of shop or house, puja room in a house. And so this is something my hoarding painter gave me. He said, I did this set, why don't you use this? So I love the iconography. So each one has an iconography, and this one is the tiffin carrier and the ribbons and this flirting, scene. Yeah, so this is in fact, this was a very important and central image because I found this, I did not know anything about these works. I found these photographs of this famous anthropological studies, done in the Andamans by Henry Porter. And this is called, this grid is actually 2" by 2". So I had to do a lot of research to find out what exactly, to reproduce them. So that was a measuring device. So they used to carry around this grid wherever they went and pose people in front of it so that you can immediately measure them. And it took me about 4 months to do this thing, this support. First I didn't know what it was, and then a friend of mine helped me to figure out, and 2 different carpenters worked on it because the first guy made it like a temple pillar. So the whole production thing is another story. I won't go too much into it. So I didn't want to be naked, so I decided to be a Toda, which is another tribe, also from the south of India, and also very much sort of studied anthropologically. So these were photographs from it was also about the history of photography and the kinds of photography. So this is a police photograph, and funnily enough, I think I found this in 2001, but by the time I did it in 2002, that banned sort of using these slates because they, even before people were sort of actually, it was proved, they were proved criminal, their names and everything was revealed in the newspapers. It's again an old colonial custom going on, police thing. So these are chain snatchers, again very typical because they go to temples and they snatch these wedding chains, Mangal Sutras of people. And this is a very famous painting by Ravi Verma, who is Ravi Verma was this 19th, early 20th century artist who actually came from a princely family, and he is supposed to have, besides other things, defined the idea of the Indian woman. So she is like a beautiful Indian woman is called, she looks like a Ravi Verma painting. And so it was also something to do with the idea of defining the nation. And he was also extremely influential in theater and film, and also took from theater. He also, I discovered, used sort of painted backdrops and all that to pose as models. So there are a lot of, this is the oldest reference that I took. It's a 16th century Deccan miniature, extremely difficult to do because it's not realistic. So Mary Ellen Mark actually was very influential in India, and she did this is from her series of circus pictures. So anyway, this is the last one, and that's my photographer, Claire, and I got tired of posing as the principal figure, so we said we'll be angels. So I'm just showing you the main series. So this is when actually things like anthropology and anthropometry came into my work, and I started thinking about that. But it's also like to do with the idea of the nation, and a lot of my work actually looks at the idea of the not necessarily only India, but also elsewhere. And I'm just showing you briefly this work I did. I was commissioned by the Centre Pompidou to work with this Paris studio called the Arco Studio. And so I recreated 3 images from the 19th century. France has this whole, So the first one is liberty, and of course, like the Statue of Liberty and the idea of the French Revolution and all that has been a very central part of our thinking about democracy, and very influential. But also at the same time, I found this image supposed to have been originally done by Ingres, but I actually found a kind of print, etching of it, which is called The Slave and Her Slave. So this was also the 19th century, was the height of the colonial, history of France. And then this was a very interesting character which a friend of mine pointed out. So there's, France cannot have a queen. It's very patriarchal society, but there were very powerful French mistresses who were, even advisors to the kings. And Countess Castiglione was a kind of Italian aristocrat who was the mistress of Napoleon III. And apparently he used her as a diplomat and as a spy and all that because she was very intelligent and she would be. So another interesting thing was that she has there are a lot of photographs, I think they're with MoMA, the collection, where she actually went to the studio of Pearson, one of the earliest photographers, and he shot photographs, very playful photographs of her. And here she's, you normally, they used to have this clamp to hold the head in these portrait photographs because it took so long, early photography took so long, cameras took so long. So you can see the clamp behind her and also this, it's not a mask, it's actually a kind of frame, photo frame. And so it's a kind of looking at French history through this place of women. And as I actually look at Indian history as well, it's the same kind of strategy that I use in India. And another work I did, this was for the Kochi Museums Biennale. It's called The Arrival of Vasco da Gama. And actually, this was a very important moment in world history and Indian history because when the Portuguese found this kind of sea route around the Horn of Africa and arrived at Calicut, what is a very foundational moment in European history, because though there was trade going on with India and other parts for thousands of years, like we were trading with Rome and, from Roman times and also with, Arabs and the African coast and the Venetians and so on. The Western Europeans could not pass through the Mediterranean because it was all completely monopolized by these countries. So they had to find another route. And so when Vasco da Gama discovered or found, there are many stories about it, that the Portuguese did not know how to cross the open sea. The Europeans did not know how to cross the open sea, and they're supposed to have taken the help of either an Indian or an Arab sailor to navigate. But once that was done, then it became a foundational moment and beginning of colonization, and also the beginning of the prosperity of Europe, because these countries are actually very poor, and then this was to do with the spice trade. So even if 3/4 of the ships were lost at sea, which used to happen, even that half a shipload or one shipload which used to arrive in Europe used to be like gold. So they made a lot of money from this. So this is myself as Vasco da Gama, and most of these are my artist friends. I think there's too much light actually. Artist friends as different characters. Like this is when Vasco da Gama comes and meets the Zamorin or the Samudra Raja, who's the king of Calicut, and who was actually a very rich and powerful person, And Vasco da Gama came from a very poor country, so the actual incident is quite different from, they found diaries and reports. So this has been, actually this was painted in the 19th century by this man called Jose Veloso Salgado, who did it like a history painting. And so you will find this very organized sort of Portuguese to the right, and to the left are this totally disorganized. This was supposed to be a very rich kind of court, very Orientalist painting where people are just hanging around, all the ministers and all that, and in completely sort of, ahistorical clothes. I think even his Vasco da Gama's, clothes are not what the Portuguese wore in that time. But I have a feeling he's borrowed all these things from some theater company, because these people never went to those, he's never been to India or never, So what I did was actually I made an installation. Oh, I haven't shown the installation, okay. This is a performance thing. Yeah, so this actually took the whole day. There are 13 characters. It's the most complicated single frame that I've done. And I had to hire a shooting studio because it's 21 feet wide, the backdrop. I couldn't do it in my own studio. And so just to make up everybody and dress everyone to be dressed, it took the entire day. And I thought we'll have to work all night because we had to keep everybody still when the photograph was taken. And several of them were like, each one was blinking or they were moving or something like that. So, but finally, but quite soon at 9:30, my photographer, I work with photographers. I don't take the photographs myself. My photographer said, look, this is the best we can do. Let's just stop here because everybody's sort of in place and still, and you can print it. So the whole thing is, yeah, so I'll just, oh, sorry. Yeah, this is what I've been working on since 2004. I worked for a long time on these things. So this again is like these recreations of the historical images of Mother India. I think only India has so many, I mean, other countries also have Britannia and so on. Many of the countries have mother figures, but we have many. So the first one is like, and it keeps changing. So it's like this whole idea of the nation keeps changing. It's quite evident. So I'm this kind of old crone. Very difficult working with a small kid. So you can see the reference image, and that's... So what was interesting is that under British times, like these images were also circulating all over the country as kind of images of resistance. And this is a very important image because it's this image, which is of fashioned on the goddess Durga, is actually used by the political BJP political party for its gatherings and so on. This is a contemporary painting by my friend Atul Dodia. I don't think people have realized it's a Mother India figure, but it's like this old crone, again going back to the earliest figure, and who is like grinding flour. And this again is a very interesting image because he's also a cinephile like me, and there's a very famous film Mother India with Nargis playing Mother India, and one of the scenes is, it's like the woman carrying a pot of water, it's again this very archetypal scene of the Indian woman, like, grinding corn, not corn actually, grinding wheat or whatever. And she's sitting, it's my favorite body of work of his. And so this took 10 hours of body makeup and actually 2 different shoots. Sometimes if I'm not happy with the shoot, I shoot again. And yeah, I'll show you some pictures. This is me being made up in my studio. And the first time around, I was wearing tights because I was feeling shy because there are about 16 people there, lightmen and all that in the studio when I'm shooting. But it didn't work, so then I decided to use this kind of swimsuit-like thing. And there's this mask and so on, so it's a very elaborate costume, which took about 10 hours to do. Yeah, this is also part of the Mother India project, in which I'm going into different. This is to actually memorialize and celebrate my friend Gauri Lankesh, who was a journalist who was assassinated by the right wing in 2017. So we were neighbors, and we used to give, she used to have a lot of parties, and she's given me several recipes. So I dress up as Mother India, and it's a live cooking performance. It was done during the COVID time, so I have an assistant who's wearing this whole PPE suit. So when I do live performance, I'm not just with the people. I have this very theatrical kind of situation, very stylized. So this Mother India actually makes this kind of tomato curry, which is called urgent saru, means urgent curry. So that's when people suddenly come in, guests, and then you have to quickly cook up something. But it's also like I chose it because it's red in color, and then finally it's distributed. My God, I made a bit of a mess. Finally, it's distributed to the people, and it's something like the Christian Eucharist as well as the Hindu Prasada. So we had this, I just invited 2-3 friends because it was this COVID time and we're not supposed to gather. So this is part of this cooking. Then I also write, and I've created this kind of persona called N. Rajalakshmi, who's this very nerdy journalist figure. So that's N. Rajalakshmi on the left, and that's interviewing the Phantom Lady. So I use this sometimes in my catalogs and so on. Yeah, now I show the video. I'm just showing you a very small video, which is also part of the Mother India project. Usually I have props, which are just lying there, but in this particular series of videos, which are called Good Habits, and I've become very interested in eugenics, which is the pseudoscience of good genes, and I feel it sort of underlies a lot of the government policies. It's to do with ethnic cleansing and also different kinds of control over the people. It's just 2 minutes, so we can just, yeah. Oh. I'm doing a series of these videos with medical models. So they're very funny, cheap-looking things which I use for in schools and nursing colleges and medical schools and so on. Yeah, so I'm actually taking forward this whole anthropometry. I'm through. And pushing it. Yeah, I'm through actually. Yeah, thank you. Do I have to wear this or? Okay.
Preferably.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Pushpa, for that really insightful presentation. Let me go back to the beginning. Before that, thank you everybody for being here and for stepping forward. This has been really a wonderful convening. So Joanna, Nada, Mace, it's good that all of you all are sitting together so I can just look at you, all together at one time. But let me, Pushpa, let me go back to how you began this presentation by saying that you hate live performance and that you'd much rather not be that vulnerable. And I remember, what was it, in the time before mobile phones, 20 years or so ago, some time ago, but a time when you were still reasonably well known. I met Pushpa and she would hand out, in the time before mobile phones and such, she would hand out her visiting cards. And her visiting card that she handed out to me said in this kind of very classical font, very ornate, very flowery font on that visiting card, it said, Pushpamala N. And then below that, celebrated artist. And this is at a time when, like I said, she's not altogether unknown. She is possibly a celebrated artist, but you don't quite know. So I think, there was something about vulnerability. There was something about really kind of performative in that visiting card. So I at some point, I'd like to come back to that idea that you began with about masquerade and what is that relationship between the mask and the face. But let me begin actually with the centerpiece of your presentation today, manners and customs.
He thinks it's a centerpiece because I got this grant, from this foundation that he was working for, and he was in charge of that grant. That's how I know him. So
we all.
It was a very important project.
we all have our visiting cards that we are trying to slip in. But one of the things, Pushpa, is that this exaggerated commitment to the copy. This kind of the kind of obsessive detail with which you go about copying works that have already existed. One of the challenges I think your work presents us with is we tend to want to expect an accent, like, where is your mark in this? What the heck are you doing here? This has already been there, done that, from Atul Dodia to Ravi Verma. They did this thing. Who are you? What are you doing? So let me begin by that.
Yeah, I think what happens is, first of all, not all these images are so well known. And I put them together in a certain way. And then I put myself into that image. So as someone said, making myself, the target of inquiry as well, of social and political inquiry as well. As you said, what am I doing in there? So I think one of the things is like they rise up to the public gaze and to public, thought that maybe you're not, you take, in fact, when I got the, I was being cross-questioned when I applied for the India Foundation grant, and they said, why do you have to copy this thing, this, actually Lakshmi or woman with a pot, whatever it is, they're very, so many people have done them. Why this particular thing? Or the flirting image. Two people flirting, you can find so many sources, and why this particular image, and why do you have to have that tiffin carrier and this and that? But for one thing, as an artist, it's a discipline. So as you're sort of constructing the image, what I'm doing is I'm actually constructing the image physically in 3 dimensions. And that's where my whole background as a sculptor also comes in. But it's also like stage design and so on. I start understanding the image. And for one thing, like this Ravi Verma's woman in Lady in Moonlight, I've studied that in art history, okay. But when I started recreating it, I said, this woman is very funny. First of all, it's supposed to be Raza, actually. He's done a series of them. So this woman is sitting in the moonlight at night. And in the 19th century, no woman would sit in the moonlight alone at night. And then what is she doing? Like her pallu, it's fallen down. And her ankle is showing, like, which a respectable woman wouldn't do. And so she's like this, in this very seductive pose. So actually, she's an early calendar picture, And she's like this sexy woman, And so, you start sort of deconstructing that image even before, as you're constructing it. And each one of those things, and again, what happens is that as an artist, we had to copy things in art school. And it was also so boring because nobody told you why you had to copy that thing. So I said, what is this boring thing, this old-fashioned Victorian thing that we have to do? But now I find it very interesting because actually, that copy makes you understand how it's put together. So what is happening with the construction is that it's simultaneously deconstructing this thing. And the whole physicality of the process. As I said, okay, Atul Dodia. Anyway, Atul Dodia is thrilled with this thing because I've got a photograph where he saw the work in a show. But he has just painted it. I thought for 5 years about how to reproduce this thing. Because it is not a realistic image, it's sort of floating inside that map. So I had to figure out how to do it, and how to photograph it and how to do the makeup and so on. It is very elaborate because you had to make a mask. And the first time I did it, we redid it actually. Nothing worked, even though, so it's like a lot of expense. And again, this, I thought I'll be very sort of, modest and have this tights on which it could be painted. Mm-hmm. Is that a time thing?
No, it isn't.
Okay. So, but what happened was in the photograph, and it's a large photograph, you could see the cloth texture and those wrinkles, which didn't look very nice. So then I decided to sort of get myself painted like my bare legs, and then I'm sorry to say that my assistant and this other guy who I asked to come in, they're both not painters. They're both done, one is a printmaker and one is a sculptor, So they actually don't know how to paint. So it took 10 hours to paint, and then we had to test out, do we paint with poster paint or do we paint with something else like, acrylic and all that, and then decided on poster paint, so on and so forth. So there are a lot of these kind of technical and decisions that have to be made and worked out, and and sometimes, when you've seen the work, you haven't noticed some details so closely. But when you have to replicate it, then you see this, And then another thing is what happens is that, say for the native types, for instance, when you put it into a set and you call it the native types, they get a completely different meaning. Yeah. So on the one hand, okay, there's a goddess there, there are fictional characters there are criminals, there are tribals, all sorts of characters, but they all become the native types. They all become objects of anthropology, anthropological study, so you change the image by the context.
Thank you, Pushpa. I mean, just listening to you, I was just reminded of this wonderful set of essays by Umberto Eco, actually. It's called Faith in Fakes. Okay. And, clearly, the range of copies that you've produced, I think...
hey, I don't do only copies.
True.
But my photo romances are completely cooked up. Of course, I use a lot of references, and my videos are also all cooked up.
We'll come to that.
Yeah.
We've got 30 minutes. But just one more thing on the copy before we move on, which has to do with the Toda image, that you presented. Yeah. And actually, that form of impersonation, to put it bluntly, crossing the color line, that has become fairly contested. There are questions about, what gives you the right, what gives you the privilege. We know the sins of anthropology, we know the problems of anthropometry, but when you are actually enacting this particular crossing of the line, what are the responsibilities of an artist? What do you need to do? How do you prepare yourself to be able to take that risk?
Yeah. No, this is something that, see, when I do a work, I think about that very carefully. I also do a lot of reading and research. And long before, like I was in Australia in 1997, and in Sydney in the museum I saw this for the first time, these 19th century anthropometric and anthropological photographs of Aboriginals. And I even bought the catalog, which I used as a reference for the ethnographic series, actually, that other series I talked about, which actually replicate, they look like these 19th century anthropological studies. In Australia, I knew about the politics because I also met Aboriginals. I had long conversations actually, and there's no way I could do it. And I know there's a very controversial photograph of this white artist who had actually, I saw it also, like done this kind of masquerade of an Aboriginal and taken a photo with that painted backdrop and holding those things. And it was very, very problematic. He was really attacked, and rightly so, and so on. But one thing in India is that I'm not a different race. I'm not a different race from the Toda.
But you are different.
Yes, I'm different from any of those people. Sometimes I am some shades fairer, and sometimes I've played Vasco da Gama, who's a European guy, Yeah. And so on. So I felt what I was doing was actually bringing this up. When you say we all know about it, we all don't know about it. You know about it because you're an anthropologist. Most of the people do not know. And I think I'm an artist who has brought this up, this whole history of photography and this whole this issue of the marginal. I mean, you can say the same thing about the police photograph and so on. I'm not that class. Yeah. They're like working class women who are stealing chains because the easiest way they can earn money or whatever it is, I'm not that class. So then I can't do anything. I have to be only myself, So I think I feel I'm more like an actor who can play different roles. And I think there's a question of respect here, I think I'm not being disrespectful. And what I'm doing is actually I'm bringing up that issue to the public gaze. But recently what happened was I'd been the ethnographic series actually, which I didn't show, but they're all a series. It's a series of 45 photographs. They're small photographs in the original sizes of these, what they would be, of all these characters in the native types that I showed you as ethnographic specimens. So they're all posing against these checked backdrops and also different kinds of typical scenes of, you find in these ethnographic photographs. And, there's a whole community of Indians in Vancouver. So one girl, and there are a lot of different newspapers. One young journalist came to do the review of my show. And she was really disturbed and she said what do you mean by doing this brown face? And so I told her all this, but she was so disturbed, she was shaking because there's no way she as an Indian could have done, say, a First Nation image. There's no way, obviously, but I told her, look, this is not, I'm not from a conquering race or from someone from outside, and this is my explanation, this is my justification. I'm from the same country and it's not a different racial thing because I'm also playing all these other characters, and I'm also making them equal. I'm making Lakshmi equal to the criminal, equal to the, the tribal, and I'm making them all into anthropological, specimens for study. Well, this is my explanation, but I know now it's this thing because also I think that I recently, there was this thing about a Dalit. The Dalits are the lowest caste in India and they're also very politically active now. And there was this whole thing of brown face being mentioned. So I don't know, I've not got any bad feedback from India yet, but we'll have to see
No, I think,
what people think.
I certainly think, Pushpa, that what it does is really draw attention to the problem-ridden foundations of all forms of knowledge. that are produced.
Knowledge and the Indian nation, because
Sure.
people think like, I get very irritated when my work is seen as post-colonial, it's not at all post-colonial, because what I'm addressing is today, what's happening today. I mean, what our own governments are doing, like 70 years after independence, like, to our own people, where there's still this idea of the center and the margins. And, still these old colonial forms are being used. And people are still being, like as I said, like, from the beginning there have been these, situations where the prime minister goes to, say, the northeastern states or something like that. He wears the headgear, some weird headgear, which they have stopped wearing 100 years ago. So he'd wear this Naga headgear or something and dance with there'll be this whole thing where there'll be a dance and then the politician goes and dances with these people. That's hilarious, like, I've got a whole collection of them. I have these little boxes with these reference images. And they're usually the most contentious sort of border states, where these guys want to just break away because they don't even think of themselves as Indians because they're so ignored and neglected and they're being oppressed, for decades. So I'm actually referring to all these things, these forms, even in terms of masquerade as well as this whole thing of, the colonization that is still going on.
Yeah. Now, I have at least 3 more questions, but... we
can do it fast, yeah. Rapidly.
But I also want to try and see if, if there are questions in the audience, if you'd like to. Yeah, so I can see one hand up. I can see many hands up now. Okay, so let me quickly take a couple and then try and move on. So, yeah, lady at the back.
First of all, thank you for everyone and the performances, etc., and for your presentation. This is just a thought that came to my mind as you're speaking about the concept of whether it's cultural appropriation, brown face, black face, etc. Nobody would criticize a person if they put on a Pompadour toupee wig and put chalk on their faces to look white. And everybody is criticized if they color their faces darker. Is this something because brought over from Western societies and our own cultures that look at people of any skin darker than the normal being ostracized? But it's okay to look and dress white, but it's a faux pas to look and dress of a different color, whether it's First Nations, Amerindians, Aboriginals. So this is just a thought that was triggered by your question and by Pushpamala's response. Why is it acceptable, on one hand, to dress like, Marie Antoinette, but it is frowned upon to dress as any First Nation, And now it's, again, the 2 extreme sides of the West. They call it cultural appropriation. What if it's something that somebody would love to showcase the beauty of the cultures? This is just a thought that came. What would...
Well, I think it's something to do with oppression, because what happened with blackface is that...
Agreed. I'm not disputing that. What I'm saying is that the whole world is imbalanced in that sense. It is okay to do this and not okay to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shall we take your question too? Yeah.
Yeah, let's
and then we'll come back. Yeah.
Hi. So thank you for sharing your work. It's wonderful to see what you've been doing so far. And my question is regarding something related to the Vasco da Gama painting and the photograph. Have you considered doing something which sort of disrupts, because that painting is originally called History.
Yes.
And as you rightly mentioned, that's not actually history, because that's definitely not what he was wearing when he landed. But have you considered doing a photograph similar to that same setup, but the attire is reversed? So in the sense that you show what you think perhaps would be, in your creative sense, what he would have been wearing had he actually been shown properly in that painting, and what the people sitting around him would have been wearing, because this area was really rich back then. And I mean, we all have seen those photographs and those paintings and those TV dramas like Tipu Sultan, where they're wearing all those beautiful jewels. And we know that those areas were quite rich. So have you considered that? If yes,
No, that's not my sort of goal actually, because I'm sort of, what I've done is, when I've shown the work, I've not shown the work by itself, but I've created a whole installation around it. So that becomes part of the work, and I have some reading materials and other things, and history of navigation, written on the blackboard, and in fact I want to develop it further because somebody has wants to have this show, and I read so much about that whole period. I'm very interested in the spice trade and the whole navigation history and so on. So I want to bring all those things and look at it. No, this kind of the inauthenticity interests me rather than any authenticity, because I don't think that's the central point that I want to make. Because there's no portraits of Vasco da Gama during his lifetime. They started doing this kind of thing of this arrival, and this arrival, there are many versions. Sometimes that king looks Chinese because they didn't even know, it's like some Chinese features and Chinese costume and all that. These are all painted like 2 centuries later, and then this is the 19th century thing, it was the 500th year of the arrival. So it's a kind of iconic thing, that arrival, the arrival of Vasco da Gama. And then people have recently found these diaries and things which are sort of doing research on. In fact, Sanjay Subramaniam, the historian, has written a book, but it's actually not about the arrival, but Portugal at that time. So, yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I've seen a couple of hands go up. I just wanted to, underline that, one of the things I find very powerful about your work, Pushpa, is that, whatever those images are, copies or whatever, but they are never innocent. They are never naive in a way that, So I think this question of cultural appropriation, this question of whether there is a potential or a possible equality among the very elements that are, you're always there's a very sophisticated kind of engagement with difference, it's not all the same. So I'll just come to those couple of questions in the audience, but I want to take you back to Phantom Lady and Kismet. One of the things about the Phantom Lady project, I thought, was on the one hand, like you said, there is this kind of heroic, this hero figure, wonderful Hunter Wali. But what is really also poignant for me is the way in which the invisible city, the way in which the city that is otherwise not kind of legible, how you actually incorporate that into an understanding of desire and aspiration. So why I find that work really wonderful is really that bit near Flora Fountain that you showed, those dreams, there are ways in which it's not just the tired sleep of the migrant, but there are also the aspirations and the desires, and that's what's unsettling, but that is also what is powerful about those images, that we tend to kind of think about the world of fantasy and the world of Bollywood as far removed from the subaltern dreams of our workers. But I think there's a way in which you really negotiate that distinction quite wonderfully well for me. So to go back to Phantom Lady, what is the Kismet part of that story?
No, I love using these old film titles, So Phantom Lady is one title, and then I just wanted to make it that, they used to have these Orientalist kind of, and in India, like every film will have, used to have like 2 or 3 titles, sometimes totally different. So this Kismet has nothing to do with Phantom Lady. Kismet, and it's spelled in that Orientalist way, like fate. Yeah, it's just fun actually. But it's just that this woman comes there, she doesn't find that sister, she's waiting for the sister at the end, maybe, That again, you have to make up the story. And see, one of the things that I do is like, all these are like no budget kind of things. All these friends come in and all that. And over here, like, Meenal, my photographer was this young photographer who was at that time the girlfriend of who was
that be.
okay. But anyway, so when we started, we shot something. She was the girlfriend. Then she got married, and then I went back a year later, and she didn't tell me. I'd fixed up this whole shoot. I discovered when I went to Bombay that she was 7 months pregnant, and then we were shooting at night, so it was quite rigorous actually. I said, can you shoot and all that, and then I'd managed to get some money and all, and I had to do it for the show, there was a deadline. She said, yeah, I can shoot and all that sort of thing. So we were, it was quite scary because I was wearing this really short
hot pants.
Yeah, because the tailor had made it really short, so they were about this short, and then I had to go around this Bombay, So we had this thing, I think Chaitanya, this art historian friend was like my assistant. He said, I said, you come along with us and all that. And Vinay Pathak, who was this who's become a big star now, but at that time he'd just come back from New York and he was somebody's boyfriend as well. So I said, you play the villain. And so it's all this kind of thing. And so we were going around to these public places like railway station, and these suburban stations which are crazy, they can have thousands of people. So we went at the end, at around 1 o'clock or something like that. And I remember, I had this cloak. So I'd be wearing this costume inside, and I had this wraparound skirt, and then I'd have this cloak like this, and we'd get off the train. And then we'd quickly, in 10 minutes, we'd shoot over there with ambient light. And then we'd, by the time a crowd gathered, we'd just go back to the next train and go to the next thing. So it was, and another thing that I do is I just had 3 characters over here. There was myself, 2 of them were myself, and there was this villain, and there was a photographer. So what I do is in all these public places, I try to incorporate the people. So then I get different classes of people there, And some of them are quite funny because we were sitting in Brabant, Unfortunately, this old Irani cafe. And there are also different histories of Bombay, of the city, because these Irani cafes were actually basically for the mill workers. So there were these immigrant Iranian people who came there, and Bombay is a city of mills, textile mills. So they used to be open 24 hours, and they have a certain kind of menu. They'll have bun and this thing keema at 2 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning, and that's for the night shift who comes out.
When the shift ends.
And so on. So so I said, let's go on early and at 6 o'clock on Sunday morning and shoot because there'll be nobody there. Actually, it was packed. And these people, degenerate people Christians. So there's a church down the road. There's a church down the road, and all these people had gone to the church, and they'd come, and it was full of people drinking beer, men drinking beer at 6 o'clock in the morning. So anyway, these Bombay people are also so used to shoots and all that, so they're kind of...
we also go see films at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. There's a 4 a.m. Bharat Mata show.
Okay.
Two more questions.
Wait, one sec, I'm just finishing.
But finish fast.
Yes, it's interesting. So there was this guy with sideburns sitting in the table behind us. So we just asked him and said, do you mind posing next to this, to me? And all that, So we just, and the waiter and the guy sitting at the counter. So all these people are incorporated into the thing as characters, yeah.
Lovely, thank you.
Hi there, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your work. I'll try to make this quick. So much of what you showed us and talked about and your work itself obviously intersects with politics and the reality of what's happening in your society, whether that's the propaganda posters that you were showing us, whether it is you said there was a From the Independence campaign?
What do you mean, propaganda posters?
Was it from the Independence?
Well, they were actually images of Mother India.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm very sorry to hear that you lost your neighbour. They were assassinated. I'm just curious. Obviously, you've survived and thrived and grown through so much, and power to you and fair play to you for that. Given where you're at the moment and where society is, I'm curious what your hopes and fears are for the artists that you've inspired that are coming up after you, given everything you've lived through and seen, and I'm sure fought through as well. Given where society is at the moment for you, what are your hopes and fears for the artists that are coming up after you?
Can I collect a couple of more questions? I mean, that looks like a rounding up kind of statement that you can give. Joanna, but before that, Joanne.
Hello. Yeah. So thank you for sharing your work with us, and obviously you have an extensive body of work that are incredible. But I just wanted to go back to that recreation of the arrival of Vasco da Gama, because it kind of reminded me of this concept of mimicry by Homi Bhabha, and as a work itself, it is that double articulation is very strong and also disruptive in a sense. But I just wanted to pick your brain a little more and ask you, what does it mean for you as a woman in a post-colonial to do that recreation in your here at that time?
Thank you, Juan. And Joanna?
Thank you so much for this. I'm interested in the moment when you perform the photo. A lot of the frames that you're stepping into are complicated frames for us to step into. And in this, I'm interested in what happens in the studio, because it's a photo to the general public, but you have an audience of the people who happen to be there and the people that you've brought there, the strangers who don't know you but didn't expect you, and the people who think they know you. But in this performative moment, when you step into something else, it's something else. Anything you'd like to talk about around that character?
Yeah, people ask me whether I meditate and become those characters, but there's nothing meditative about that moment, because I'm the director as well as this so-called performer, and I don't even know whether mine is performance, because it's basically posing, a lot of it in the photographs. And even with the videos, I don't know how to use a moving camera, so it's like a tableau, So I have a still camera in the center, and we enter, and go out, and I just write the script, they're all silent, and because none of us know how to act or speak. And my friends just come in on that day, and I tell them what to do. So what's happening is when I make sort of photocopies of the original picture, if at all, or we do a rehearsal for the videos right then and there, and I see it now with the digital camera. I can see it, and then I can, because earlier when we were shooting Native women, it was like a film camera. So we just used to shoot a lot, hundreds of pictures, and then select. So that's what I do. A lot of it is to do with the editing, because sometimes it's completely off, because I don't know how I look when I'm this thing. And also I'm shouting instructions to people, that somebody has to get something, and so I'm saying, yeah, you get those clips in that room over there, the third shelf and all that, and so on and so forth. And then I have an assistant director, in the sense some friend comes in or something, and I say, just see if if this looks right and all that, and give the okay, and if I have to turn this way, that way, you tell me. But sometimes I have to reshoot, because what happened is, for example, the Kichaka Sairandri thing, where this, it's actually rape was a metaphor for colonization, So there's this heroine from the Mahabharata. She's hiding behind the curtain, and this man, the prince, is sort of, trying to seduce her. So I had to shoot it twice. Many of them I have shot twice, because what happened is the photographer is only interested in the lighting and the technical aspects. So they're doing that, And though it's not enactment or there's no movement going on, what happened was that everything was perfect with the first shoot, except that our eyes didn't meet. Kichaka was looking here and I was looking somewhere else. So it didn't make any sense at all psychologically. So I had another shoot and made sure that our gazes met. So it's all things like this, It is not performance in the sense of, yeah.
No, it's exciting to hear, because it's still, but it feels live.
Yeah.
You feel that you've invited spontaneity into your work process, and so it's captured somehow. It's really
But we do it over and over and over again, actually, till it comes okay. And then basically, it's a lot to do with the mise en scène that I create. So it's the backdrops and the lighting and all those elements which create the kind of mise en scène. which actually creates the mood and the thing. But if I actually try to act, it's a mess. Because I tried that, like I didn't show you that set of pictures. It's to do with the 9 emotions, like 9 moods, Navarasa, which is used a lot in dance. And I was trying to do these things, one is revulsion, one is anger and all that. So I was posing like, revulsion was like this and anger was like this. It looked awful, And so I asked this Shanta Gokhale, our anger, I said what to do and all that is not working. So she told me that actually there's not much difference between all these different emotions, and it's actually, it's situational. So you just go inwards and then you don't have too much of an expression, And so basically I tell my friends who are, other performers and myself, don't have any emotion on your face. Just look here and there, So it's the whole situation the mise-en-scène which creates the emotion. If you try to have some kind of emotional, the expression on your face, it becomes ridiculous, actually. So my works are always on the edge of the, comic and this thing, the serious. If it becomes too comic, it doesn't work. It's too serious, it doesn't work. So it has to be on that edge.
There are, I know, 2 unanswered questions, but also 3 unasked questions. But that is how it is. I mean, there were three things that I wanted to read out from this fabulous new book
Please buy
that
it.
the Sharjah Art Foundation just produced with reliable copy. This is Pushpamala's master's dissertation that she wrote back in 1985. And it's fabulous to know that she actually began life wanting to be a sculptor. And has ended up impersonating I don't know how many Pushpamalas.
Started doing sculpture again.
One of the reasons why it's infinitely frustrating to interview or to talk with or be in conversation with Pushpamala is that, as you saw in that slide back there, the only one who can interview or talk to Pushpamala is Pushpamala herself. But thank you all. I think we should have, after that morning performance, I think Venuri, are you in the audience? Yeah, I think it would be brilliant to have you come here. I think it's a photo op. I mean, I listened to all your instructions very carefully, but I don't know when you said, put on your seat belt, because I forgot to see that
Mausam
instruction.
kharab hai.
I mean, Mausam kharab hai. I mean, what a ride. So thank you so much, Venuri, for that. And probably if you can come up, probably we can have conversations with, the 2 of you.
Both of I'm supposed to be there as well?
No, well, I mean, whatever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We wanted to give a few minutes in case anyone had a specific question for Venuri. Maybe a show of hands, if there is someone. Otherwise, we are ready to break for lunch. Anyone? Last chance? One question.
Venuri, we had a brief chat before, probably as the only other, Sri Lankan passport holder. You were portraying the exorcist ceremony, which is deeply ingrained in the culture of the South, probably not so in the North. But would the audience, how would you, communicate it to the audience? How would the audience understand the depth of what which you did brilliantly, and making it contemporary? But how does the audience understand? And I'm going to ask George another question to Pushpamala as well. I'm really interested in the intention of the artist and the impact, and how you select from 100 takes which one to put forward. This is a psychologist speaking. Thank you.
Thank you for your question. And it's great to have another Sri Lankan here as well. And of course, I know that what it means to be Sri Lankan in this country. It's kind of, I've been taking elements of various ritual practices that I've been observing, because actually in Sri Lanka, women are not allowed to conduct ritual. Women are not allowed in the sacred space. So I wouldn't say that, clearly this is a fake ritual, it's a performance and it's a satire. What I like to do is not to actually conduct ritual, but to kind of, to subvert the frameworks to be able to say something that I wanted to say. So that was kind of, so specifically that I'm not actually doing any kind of Sri Lankan ritual that exists. But I find elements that are really amazing for contemporary performance, actually, I feel. So I've been taking that, and actually the rituals kind of all night. I kind of say that it's like the, you know, the bite-size kind of quick short version for the contemporary life. And so in that sense, it doesn't really matter if the audience understands the kind of background of where things have come from, because at that time also I was in a couple of places, and I actually found that in different, so I was in South Korea a little bit, I was in Japan, I was in Cote d'Ivoire, and there were actually, when you go deep, I mean, when you go and see these certain specific rituals that people are like, which are hyper-local, you actually find amazing connections across, and people are doing very similar things. And for me, I'm also kind of thinking about how to, how can you make the mundane sacred? Like, not to bring like objects from the past or whatever, but what is it that I find at the moment there, like, you know, the objects that I work with every day, and kind of with the intention and what I'm doing, like shift something, some energy in the space, which I guess is a kind of a, yeah, that's, I hope I answered your question.
Thank you, Benari.